Two friends went with me under the ocean. One was burned alive. The other still shares my secrets. I've always been fascinated by the ocean. It covers most of the earth, yet we still don't know what all lives there. That's why I joined a research project by a company devoted to documenting sea life. I had been assigned, alongside my coworkers Cindy and Lance, to monitor an area in the Atlantic that the company believed was part of the migratory path of basking sharks. Our job consisted of dropping anchor in an area in the Atlantic, then lowering a camera down to observe the area and document any basking sharks passing through. For the last 3 days, we witnessed 12 crabs, 32 fish, and 0 basking sharks. Lance made a remark about how we had the task of watching for the one camera-shy species of fish in the entire ocean. That night, Cindy and I were out on the deck, looking at the now blackened seas, when suddenly, Lance shouted from the cabin,
"Cindy, Madison, come look at this!"
We both ran over to the cabin, and Lance was pointing at the monitor.
"Right here."
Lance was pointing at something in the monitor. Save for the light on the camera, everything else was black, except for what looked like a faint light in the distance. "What is that, Lance?" Lance looked at the light again, then back at us.
"I don't know. Maybe it's an ROV from another ship?"
I almost considered it, but remembered this area was exclusive to our company. But we're supposed to be the only research vessel for 30 miles. Could we check the archived footage of the 3 previous days? Maybe we can see when this thing started creeping over the horizon.
Way ahead of you, Madison.
Lance went over to our second monitor and began scrubbing through the footage of each day until we got to this morning.
"And it started right here."
Lance slowed the footage down, then that's when the light began to crest over.
"And it's been coming this way ever since."
The discussion about what to do boiled down to watching the live feed in shifts to watch the light. Because I suggested it, I was given first watch. I watched the light grow slightly for about an hour. It went from being the size of a dime to a nickel, but I still couldn't make out any new details from it. I tried to stay awake to watch it further, but boredom is an effective sleep aid. I woke up to see that the light was closer to the camera and larger. Before I could check the time, how long I'd been asleep, that's when I noticed something in the light. It looked like the silhouette of a man slowly walking in the sand. I ran to get Cindy and Lance. They were dumbfounded when they saw this silhouette. Lance went on about how the man couldn't have stayed down there so long without equipment and that the water pressure should have killed it. Cindy was more concerned about the glow it was giving off. I looked back at the feed to see that the man had stopped walking and alerted Lance and Cindy of this. We stared at the screen as the light around the man started to dim. Then he turned his head to look right at our camera. Lance was the first to realize what this meant.
"Someone, go to the crane and pull the camera up!"
Before we could leave the cabin, Cindy pointed out that the man had stopped looking at the camera and was walking away. A moment of relief turned to terror as the boat suddenly bobbed. It had grabbed the anchor. We all ran over to the stern. Looking over the edge, we saw the same strange orange light rapidly rising. It was climbing up the anchor chain. Somehow it could climb much faster than it could walk. Within minutes, the light was only 10 feet away from us. The growing orange light was followed by the water around the chain boiling. Then, as it was out to breach the surface, we stumbled back as the man's head came out of the water, steam coming off it as the man climbed onto the boat. What stood before us was a 7-foot humanoid figure. He was naked but had no genitals and was built like a bodybuilder. His skin resembled the color of burned wood, with lots of cracked, open wounds that had a faint orange glow emanating from them. His eyes were solid orange and gave off a similar glow. We stared at the thing that had just crawled up the anchor chain to our boat. Cindy was the first one to say something to it.
"Hello?"
The man looked at Cindy. I swear the light outside him got brighter as he replied with a voice that was deep and sounded slightly distorted.
Why were you watching me?
We stared at the man again. It looked like his body kept growing brighter. I tried to keep a neutral tone with my reply. Our apologies, we were out here to observe marine life that migrate in this area.
You come to watch me? I've seen your machine before, a giant black eye that comes down to observe me. Then when I get close, it rises back up before I can catch it. This time you weren't fast enough. Again, I ask, why are you watching me?
I didn't know how to respond. None of us knew this thing existed, but apparently the company did. Lance tried to explain.
Look, we didn't even know you were here. Other people have been paid to come to this area, and they were most likely told that this was to observe marine life as well.
The man looked at Lance. Its faint glow had become comparable to a lantern now.
If you did not intend to watch me, then you will surrender your ship to me.
Cindy was the first to object.
Listen, I know you're upset, but we can't just give you our...
Lance cut Cindy off.
We would be glad to. Just give me a minute to get our life raft and it's all yours.
I couldn't believe what Lance had done, leaving us to die on a life raft while this thing got to keep our boat and go God knows where with it. Cindy immediately objected.
Lance, we can't just give the ship to him.
Of course we can, Cindy. This poor guy's probably been walking across the ocean floor for a very long time.
Lance walked into the cabin, leaving us with this thing. The glowing never stopped amplifying, but now I could see in the lights on the ship that actual heat was coming off of him as well. I was worried that he could have been radioactive. While waiting for Lance, I felt compelled to ask this thing a question. Why were you walking across the ocean floor? The thing tilted its head before responding.
My purpose is to arrive at the new land and destroy it. My only way of getting there is to walk. The boats of wood could not withstand me.
As he continued, I finally noticed the smell of burning wood. I looked down and saw smoke coming out from under his feet.
Where is your associate?
Suddenly, Lance ran out with a harpoon gun.
Right here!
With that, Lance fired a harpoon at the man. It reacted to the projectile with incredible speed. It grabbed the harpoon, its body glow quickly changing from orange to yellow, then finally blue. The cracks in its body opened further as fire started coming out of them. The harpoon was now glowing bright orange, bending and melting in its hand as it let the molten metal fall to the deck. It looked at Lance with rage.
Humans never learn.
The man moved at a horrifying speed, grabbing Lance by the neck and taking him over to the starboard side. The man's fire diminished because it was now enveloping Lance. We watched as he screamed and flailed in agony. I was taken out of my trance by Cindy suddenly darting past me to get into the cabin. I turned to see if the man had noticed, but he was still burning Lance alive. Cindy came back out holding a fire extinguisher.
Get to the crane controls. I'll see if I can cool him down.
I didn't question Cindy's suicidal plan. I just ran over to the controls and watched as she ran over to the man, who had just finished thoroughly burning Lance to death.
Freeze, you freak!
Cindy proceeded to spray the man with a fire extinguisher, causing him to drop Lance's body into the water while I moved the crane as fast as I could towards it. Cindy ducked just as the arm of the crane struck the man, sending him into the water. His splash was followed by the area he was in, steaming and bubbling. I set the cable on the crane to retract while Cindy started raising the anchor so it couldn't climb back up. After that, we started up the motor and hauled ass back to the marina. We were both pretty certain that the company wouldn't believe us, even with the video footage and the footprints burned onto the floor of the deck. When the time came to talk to our boss, he told us that the footage we had was excellent and that Lance's accidental death was a tragedy. The company had decided that Lance was trying to cook something in the cabin's small kitchen when an unknown defect in the stove created an explosion that set Lance ablaze. He ran out, leaving a trail of burned footprints, and jumped overboard to put himself out. I didn't contest the narrative, and neither did Cindy. It was obvious that the company had dealt with this thing before, and no amount of contesting would make them even partially admit what really happened. Shortly after, we were both let go as the research project was deemed complete. I eventually did get a permanent job with another oceanic research company, and after a year the nightmare stopped. I still think about the man walking across the ocean floor. I'm not sure where the new land he was referring to actually is, but every time I see news about fire breaking out in coastal towns, a chill runs down my spine. Jack's Falls isn't the kind of town that gets written about in travel magazines. Population hovering around 3,000, one main street with a hardware store and a diner that closes at 6, and a coastline so rocky and unwelcoming that even the seagulls seem pissed off about it. The town's claim to fame is its name, which comes from Captain Jack Morgan, a pirate who supposedly fled British naval ships in 1699 and vanished somewhere along our stretch of coast. Local legend says he and his crew made it ashore with their plunder but were never seen again. Most people assume they got away in a rowboat or died in the surf. I assumed that too until 3 months ago. Mark had been obsessed with Captain Jack's story since we were kids. He'd grown up on tales his grandfather told him about hidden treasure and secret caves. The kind of thing that sounds awesome when you're 10 and pathetic when you're 27. But Mark never let it go. He'd spent years researching old naval records, studying tide patterns, hiking every inch of coastline looking for cave entrances that matched historical descriptions. His girlfriend Sarah enabled him, mostly because she found his enthusiasm charming and because she liked hiking. Me? I just went along because Mark was my best friend and I didn't have much else going on. When Mark called me that October morning, I could hear the tremor in his voice before he even said hello.
I found it, John. I actually fucking found it.
He'd been exploring a section of cliff face about 2 miles north of town, somewhere we'd passed dozens of times without noticing anything unusual. But the recent storm had caused a minor rock slide, and Mark had spotted something that made him scramble down to investigate. A small opening, partially concealed by centuries of erosion and debris, but unmistakably man-made around the edges. He'd taken photos, measurements, and coordinates. He wanted to go back with proper equipment.
It's this weekend or never,
he said.
Tide patterns won't be this favorable again until next year. And you know the county's been talking about putting up fences along the whole stretch. This is it, John. This is actually it.
I should have said no. I had a dozen good reasons. My knees weren't what they used to be. I had work on Monday, and cave diving or spelunking or whatever the hell you wanted to call crawling around in tight, dark spaces had never been my idea of fun. But Mark had that tone in his voice, the one that meant he was going with or without me. Unfortunately, I'd known him since we were 10. I couldn't let my best friend do something that stupid alone. Sarah picked me up Saturday morning in Mark's truck, the bed already loaded with gear, helmets with mounted lights, ropes, carabiners, a first aid kit that looked military grade, energy bars, water bottles, and what looked like a small sledgehammer.
In case we need to widen anything,
Sarah explained when she caught me staring. She was tall and athletic. From what Mark had told me, she ran marathons for fun and had opinions about specific hydration packs. She worked as a physical therapist and approached Mark's treasure hunting with the same practical enthusiasm she brought to helping people recover from knee surgery.
Mark's already down there doing a preliminary scout. He's been up since 4.
The drive took 20 minutes, the last 5 on a dirt road that barely qualified as a path. We parked where the trees gave way to scrub grass and jagged rocks, the ocean visible as a gray-blue line in the distance. The wind coming off the water was cold enough to sting. Mark was waiting by the cliff edge, practically vibrating with excitement. He'd rigged a rope system to make the descent easier, and he walked us through it twice before we started down. The climb down wasn't terrible, maybe 30 feet of careful scrambling, but it was enough to get my heart rate up. The cave entrance was exactly as unimpressive as I'd feared. A crack in the rock face, maybe 3 feet high and 2 feet wide. Mark had cleared away some of the smaller debris, but it still looked like the Earth's asshole. "You sure about this?" I asked.
The historical records are clear.
Mark said, pulling out his phone to show me a photo of a yellow document.
British naval logs from HMS Dartmouth, dated November 1699. They chased Morgan's crew to this exact stretch of coast. The pirates made it to shore but never came back. The naval captain assumed they had a ship waiting on the other side of the peninsula. But there's no record of Morgan or his crew ever surfacing again. 18 men, John. 18 men in a cargo hold worth of Spanish silver. Just vanished.
"Maybe they drowned," I said.
Then where are the bodies?
Mark's eyes had that gleam I recognized, the one that meant he'd already made up his mind and was just going through the motions of conversation.
This cave goes somewhere. I can feel the air moving. There's space in there.
Sarah was already putting on her helmet, checking her light.
We stick together. We stay in radio contact. And if anything feels wrong, we turn back. Deal?
I wanted to say no. I wanted to suggest that we call someone official, get proper permits, and do this the right way. But I could see the desperation in Mark's face, the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching. This was his white whale, and his one shot of proving all those years of research weren't for nothing. Sarah was already checking her gear. The opening was right there, and I was already putting on my helmet. We went in single file. Mark first with the biggest light, then Sarah, then me bringing up the rear. Now, I'm not a big guy, but the entrance was still a tight squeeze. I had to turn my shoulders and exhale to fit through. Rocks scraped against my back and chest simultaneously. For about 10 feet, it felt like I was being swallowed. The walls pressed in from all sides, and then suddenly it opened up. The first chamber was about the size of a large bedroom, the ceiling high enough to stand in most places. Our lights cut through the darkness, revealing rough stone and a floor that sloped gently downward. The air was cool, but not cold, with a faint smell I couldn't quite place. Mineral, maybe salt? Yet there was something organic underneath it all.
See?
Mark's voice echoed slightly.
This is definitely man-made. Look at the walls.
He was right. In places you could see tool marks, spots where someone had deliberately widened the passage or smoothed away irregularities. It wasn't obvious, not unless you were looking for it, but once Mark pointed it out, I couldn't unsee it. We moved deeper. The cave branched twice, but Mark seemed confident about which way to go, consulting a hand-drawn map he'd made based upon his research. He'd overlaid British naval charts with geological surveys and local folklore, creating a composite that supposedly showed the most likely route the pirates would have taken. I didn't understand half of it, but Sarah seemed convinced enough to keep following. The temperature stayed consistent, that cool but not cold feeling, and the faint smell grew stronger. Not quite mineral anymore. Something else. Copper pennies, maybe? Old metal. I caught myself breathing through my mouth to avoid it, which was stupid because then I could taste it instead. About 40 minutes in, we stopped to drink water and check our bearings. Mark's excitement was palpable, but I noticed Sarah was quieter than usual. When I asked if she was okay, she just nodded and said the smell was getting to her too. We agreed to give it another hour before turning back, regardless of what we found. The passage narrowed and widened in irregular patterns, sometimes forcing us to crouch, other times opening into spaces where our lights couldn't quite reach the ceiling. In one larger chamber, we found the remains of old torches, just charred bits of wood that crumbled when Mark tried to pick one up. Evidence someone had been here before, which made sense given the pirate story, but also made the place feel more oppressive somehow. It was as if we were following in the footsteps of doomed men.
There!
Sarah said suddenly, pointing her light at the wall. Scratched into the stone, barely visible, were marks. Not random scratches, but deliberate cuts, symbols that might have been letters worn smooth by time. Mark ran his fingers over them, his breath becoming faster. He pulled out his phone and took several photos from different angles.
This is it,
he whispered.
This is actually it. This is 17th century script. I'm sure of it. Look at the way the R's are formed and the long S. That looks like an F. This is period accurate.
He was nearly trembling as he traced the letters, his academic background in colonial history finally paying off in the most literal way possible. The passage narrowed again, forcing us to crouch and then crawl. My knees immediately regretted every decision that had led me here. The walls felt closer now, and I became acutely aware of the tons of rock above us. The ocean somewhere beyond that, the very real possibility of getting stuck or lost or worse. After maybe 20 minutes of crawling, my hands were scraped raw, even through my gloves, and my knees felt like they'd been beaten with a hammer. The passage opened into another chamber, this one larger than the first, maybe 15 feet across and 10 feet high. Our lights played across the walls, revealing more tool marks and what looked like old scorch marks from torches. Then Mark swept his light around and froze.
Holy shit.
The skeleton was slumped against the far wall, still wearing the rotted remains of what might have been a coat. The fabric had long since degraded to brown tatters, but you could still make out what might have been brass buttons scattered on the ground nearby. The skull had tipped forward, jaw hanging open in a silent scream, and one arm was extended as if reaching for something. Around the bones were scraps of leather, a rusted knife that had corroded almost completely away, and what looked like the remains of a small barrel. The wooden staves collapsed inward. Sarah yelped like she'd been punched. Mark just stood there, staring, his light steady on the corpse.
Is this real?
Sarah asked.
It's real.
Mark's voice was barely above a whisper. He moved closer, careful not to disturb anything, playing his light over the remains.
Look at the clothing, the style of the coat, the buttons. This is late 17th century. I'd bet my life on it. This is one of them, one of Morgan's crew.
But what made us all stop and really stare was the wall behind the skeleton. Someone had carved words into the stone. Not just a few marks, but entire paragraphs. The letters crude but deliberate, clearly done with something small and sharp. Probably that knife. Over what must have been days or weeks. The text started high up on the wall and descended in ragged columns, getting harder to read as it went down. Mark moved closer, playing his light over the text, and began to read aloud. His voice shook slightly.
November 15th. 1699. We are 12 now. The cave goes deeper than we thought. Captain says there's a way through the other side of the peninsula. But Davies and Mockton went looking 2 days past and haven't returned. We hear them sometimes calling from below, but we search and find nothing.
The handwriting was rough, the spelling inconsistent in the way of men who'd learned their letters late in life. But the message was clear. Mark moved his light down, finding more text carved in shaking lines.
November 18th. The food is running low. Captain has ordered rationing. We dare not go back the way we came. The Navy dogs are surely waiting at the entrance. James swears he heard Davies calling from somewhere below. But we search and find nothing. The air tastes wrong down here. Thomas says it's the damp, but I know better. Something's not right.
Jesus.
Sarah breathed. She moved closer to me, and I realized she was shaking. More text, the letters growing more cramped and erratic as they descended the wall, like the writer had been running out of space or time or sanity.
November 22nd. 5 more gone. They went deeper, seeking another way out, seeking fresh air, seeking anything but this tomb. The captain is changing. He speaks of voices in the dark. William says the treasure is cursed and he should leave it, abandon it in the deepest hole we can find. But the captain will not hear of it. He guards it like a dragon guards gold in the old stories my mother used to tell. The walls feel warm to the touch now, which makes no sense this deep. We are far below the sun's reach. The water that drips from above is thick as sticky, not clean like it should be. It leaves stains on our clothes. Jacob drank some yesterday despite warning and has been sick ever since. He cannot stop shitting himself. The smell is awful.
I reached out and touched the wall where the writer had mentioned warmth. The corpse was right. It was warm. Not hot, but distinctly warmer than it should be this far underground. At least 10 degrees warmer than the air around it. I pulled my hand back and found my fingertips slightly damp with that same sticky residue. "Keep reading," I said. Mark continued, his light moving to text that was barely legible now. The letters scratched so hard and fast they'd gouged the stone in places, leaving deep furrows that our light cast shadows in.
November 27. 3 of us remain. Jacob died yesterday. We buried him in the tunnel, but this morning he was gone, as if the cave swallowed him whole. The captain has taken the treasure and Thomas deeper into the cave. He says the voices told him where to go. He is mad. We are all mad. The cave breathes. I swear it. At night I hear it, a great bellowing sound like a whale. The walls pulse. Yesterday I saw John Carver embedded in the rock up to his waist, still alive but unable to move. His eyes followed me as I passed. He was begging me for help, but I did not know what to do. I tried to dig him out, but the rock was soft like clay, and it only made him sink deeper. When I returned hours later, he was gone. Only a stain remaining like someone had spilled wine. The thing in the caves, it hungers. It feeds slowly. It savors.
"Okay," I said. "Okay, we should go back."
Are you kidding?
Mark's eyes were wild in the light of his headlamp.
This is it, John. This is the actual historical record of what happened to them and the treasure. He says the captain took it deeper. It's still down here.
Mark, this is clearly a man losing his mind.
Sarah said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice.
Walls that breathe? People embedded into rock? He was starving and dehydrated.
Then explain this.
Mark pointed to a spot on the wall where the text ended. There, carved with what must have been the last of the writer's strength, were final words.
It took them all. It will not leave us.
Below that, a date, December 3rd, 1699. And below that, scratched so deep the stone had cracked.
It beats!
The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of our breathing and a faint dripping somewhere in the darkness beyond our lights.
There's another passage,
Mark said, pointing to a gap in the far wall.
If the captain went deeper, that's where he'd have gone. The treasure is down there.
Mark, no, I said. This is insane. We should document this. Come back with professionals.
Oh, blah, blah, blah. By the time we do that, the county will have sealed the cave. You know they will. This is our one chance.
He was already moving toward the gap, Sarah following after a moment's hesitation. I looked at the skeleton one more time, at those empty eye sockets and that reaching hand, and then I followed my friends deeper into the earth. The passage was tighter than anything we'd encountered so far, a squeeze that required removing our packs and pushing them ahead of us as we crawled on our bellies. The rock pressed in from all sides, and for one horrible moment I was certain I'd gotten stuck. My chest too large for the gap, my hips wedged between unyielding stone. Then something gave way and I popped through into a larger space where Mark and Sarah were waiting.
You okay?
Sarah asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My hands were shaking. The chamber was different from the others. The walls had a strange texture, less like rock and more like something else. Coral, maybe, or cartilage. And the smell was stronger here. That copper penny scent mixed with something organic and faintly rotten. Mark ran his hand along the wall and frowned.
This doesn't feel like limestone.
What does it feel like?
Sarah asked.
I don't know. It's softer and warm. Really warm.
I touched the wall myself and immediately regretted it. He was right. It was warm. Almost body temperature, and the surface had a slightly unyielding quality, like pressing on firm rubber. When I pulled my hand away, my fingertips came back damp with something that wasn't quite water. It was thicker, slightly viscous. When I rubbed my fingers together, it felt alkaline, like the slick you get from dissolving soap. We should turn back, I said again.
Look.
Mark's light had found something embedded in the wall. A coin. A gold coin, its surface tarnished green but unmistakable.
Spanish doubloon. Has to be. Sarah, take a picture.
She did, her camera flash momentarily blinding us all. Mark pulled out a small pry bar from his pack and began working at the coin.
Mark, don't.
The coin came free with a wet sucking sound. Mark held it up triumphantly, turning it in the light. Then Sarah made a sound, and we both looked to where she was pointing. The wall where the coin had been was bleeding. I wish it was stained water or some mineral seepage. But it was blood. Thick, dark blood that welled up from the hole and began to run down the wall in slow rivulets.
What the fuck?
Mark whispered. The wall around the wound began to pulse, slowly at first, then faster. A rhythmic motion that spread outward in ripples. And somewhere in the distance, deep in the cave, we heard it. A sound like thunder, like drums, like a heartbeat. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump.
Okay.
Sarah said, her voice tight.
Okay, maybe we should.
The wall bled faster, the blood now flowing freely, and more of those pulsing ripples spread outward. In my peripheral vision, I saw movement. Other areas of the wall beginning to shift and flex.
We need to go.
Sarah said.
Now.
But Mark was already moving forward, his light catching something in the passage ahead.
Wait, do you see that?
More coins, dozens of them, embedded in the walls and floor like metal studs in leather. And beyond them, a larger space, a chamber. Against every instinct I had, we moved forward. The walls were unmistakably organic. The texture was wrong, the color was wrong. It had shifted from gray stone to something redder, malted with darker patches that looked disturbingly like bruises. The floor was wet, covered in a thin film of that same viscous fluid, and our boots made soft squelching sounds with each step. The heartbeat sound was louder now, no longer distant. It echoed in all directions, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. The chamber opened up before us, and Mark's light found the treasure. It wasn't the pile of gold I think we'd all imagined. Instead, the coins and silver pieces were embedded in the walls and floors. Hundreds maybe, all partially absorbed into the red organic tissue that made up the chamber. Some were still visible as distinct objects, others were half dissolved, their edges blurred and melted into the flesh. And in the center of it all, surrounded by the treasure, were the bodies. They should have been skeletons after 300 years, but they weren't. They were corpses, preserved in various states of decay. Their clothing rotted to rags, but their flesh still clinging to their bones. Some were embedded in the floor, sunken halfway into the tissue as if the cave had been slowly digesting them. Others stood upright, held in place by growths of that red tissue that wrapped around their limbs and torsos like vines. One wore what might have once been a captain's coat. His jaw hung open, and in the empty socket of his mouth something glistened wetly.
This isn't real.
Sarah said, but her voice carried no conviction.
This can't be real.
The heartbeat was so loud now it made my ribs vibrate. Thump-thump, thump-thump. And as I watched, one of the corpses moved. It was subtle at first, just a twitch of the finger, a slight turn of the head. Then the jaw began to work, opening and closing slowly, and those empty eye sockets seemed to fix on us. Another corpse moved, then another. The tissue that held them in place began to pulse and contract, pushing them forward, helping them move. They pulled free from the walls with wet, tearing sounds, leaving dark cavities behind that immediately began to close. "Run!" I yelled. We turned and fled back the way we'd come, but the passage was changing. The walls were contracting, the space narrowing with each pulse of that massive heartbeat. Behind us I could hear shuffling, scraping sound as those things pulled themselves from their resting places and began to follow. Mark reached the squeeze point first and threw himself into it, his pack scraping against the walls. Sarah was next, and I could see her struggling, the space tighter than it had been just minutes ago. The walls were warm and wet and moving, contracting slowly like the throat of something swallowing. I glanced back and saw them coming, moving with horrible purpose. Their movements were jerky and wrong, limbs bending in directions they shouldn't. The captain was in front, and as I watched, he opened his mouth and that wet, gleaming thing inside flexed and reached forward. I threw myself into the squeeze and immediately realized I was in trouble. The space was too tight now, the walls pressing in from all sides. I could hear Sarah ahead of me, could see Mark's light on the other side, but I couldn't move forward. The tissue around me pulsed and contracted, and I felt something give way beneath my stomach, the floor softening and beginning to pull me down.
"John!
Mark's voice, distant and panicked.
John, move!"
I pushed with everything I had, my pack catching on something, my helmet scraping rock. Behind me, one of those things reached the squeeze and began to force its way in, its body compressing and bending in ways that made my stomach turn. I could smell it now, that rotting copper smell, and I could feel its breath on the back of my neck. The floor beneath me softened further, and with horror, I realized it wasn't just soft, it was dissolving. I could feel the fabric of my pants beginning to stick to it, fibers pulling free, the material weakening. The tissue was digesting me, slowly but surely breaking me down. With a final desperate heave, I pushed forward, felt something in my chest pop, and then I was through, tumbling. Mark grabbed me and hauled me to my feet.
Go, go, go!
Sarah yelled. We ran. The walls pulsed with each heartbeat, narrowing and widening, trying to slow us down. More of those things were appearing, pulling themselves from the walls like hatching insects, their movements growing more coordinated as we watched. The tissue responded to them differently, helping them rather than hindering them, pushing them forward while trying to hold us back. We reached the skeleton and the writing, and I thought we might make it. The entrance was just beyond. Daylight would be just beyond that. We just had to reach the rope, climb up, get in the truck, and leave this nightmare behind. Mark screamed. I turned in time to see him go down hard. The first skeleton we saw latched onto his ankle with a grip that made him cry out in pain. His helmet flew off, the light spinning across the floor. More of them were pouring through the passage behind us. At least 5 or 6 that I could see, and more beyond them. Mark was on his stomach, kicking frantically with his free leg, trying to break loose. The thing that had him wasn't letting go. Its fingers had sunk into his jeans, and where they gripped I could see dark stains spreading, the fabric dissolving under his touch. Sarah dove for him without hesitation, grabbing his arms, trying to pull him free. Her face was twisted with effort and terror, tears streaming down her cheeks.
I've got you. I've got you, Mark. Just hold on.
But the thing was winning, dragging him backward inch by inch toward the others. Mark's fingers scraped against the stone floor, leaving streaks of blood. His eyes found mine, and in them I saw absolute terror.
John, help me!
I took a step forward, my hands clenched into fists. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to help them, to grab Mark's other arm, to fight those things off with whatever I had left. Then I saw what was behind Mark. More of them, at least a dozen, shambling forward from the deeper tunnels with those jerky movements, their bodies bent at wrong angles. The captain was among them, that rotted captain's coat still hanging from his shoulders, and his jaw was working slowly like he was trying to speak. Behind them, the passage itself was closing, the walls contracting in visible waves, the organic tissue flexing and pulsing as it moved. The opening was already half the size it had been, and getting smaller with each heartbeat. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. Sarah looked up at me, still holding onto Mark, and in her eyes I saw the same realization I just had. There wasn't time. Even if we got Mark free right now, even if we somehow got past those things, the passage was closing and we had seconds. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe less, before we were sealed in here forever, with these things and this breathing, digesting nightmare. The passage contracted further. 20 seconds, maybe.
John, please!
Mark's voice was breaking, cracking with fear and pain and desperation. His free leg was kicking at the thing's face, but it didn't even seem to notice.
Please! Don't leave me! Sarah, don't let him!
I saw the passage ahead, constricting further. The opening now barely 3 feet wide. 15 seconds. I saw the things closing in, their hands reaching, their mouths working silently. 10 seconds. I saw Sarah straining to hold on to Mark, her boots losing purchase on the floor as it began to soften beneath her weight. The tissue was responding to her, starting to digest her too. In a few more seconds, she'd be stuck, and then she'd be trapped as well. And then we'd all die here. 5 seconds, and I ran. Not toward them. Away. Toward the entrance passage, toward daylight, toward escape. Toward being the only one who survived.
John!
Sarah's scream echoed after me, filled with betrayal and rage and terror and disbelief.
John, you fucking coward, come back!
I kept running. My boots pounded against stone that was rapidly becoming flesh, each step sinking slightly before I pushed off again. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. If I looked back, I would stop, and if I stopped, I would die. Some animal part of my brain had decided that my life was worth more than theirs.
No, John, please! Mark!
Sarah's voice was receding now, but I could still hear her sobbing.
Mark, hold on. I won't leave you. I won't.
The passage was narrowing fast now, the organic tissue contracting in waves that chased me up toward the surface. Behind me, I could hear Sarah crying, could hear Mark begging, could hear the wet sounds of the cave responding to them. The things must have reached them. I heard Sarah scream again, heard Mark cry out, heard sounds I will never be able to forget and can never describe. I kept running. The guilt hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My legs were moving on their own now, pure animal panic overriding everything else. Friendship, loyalty, basic human decency. I was going to survive and they were going to die, and that was just how it was going to be. I reached the next chamber, the one we passed through on the way in, and I could hear footsteps behind me. Not the shuffling of those corpse things, but the running footsteps of someone alive. I risked a glance back and saw Sarah. She'd let go of Mark. She'd made the same choice I had. Her face was streaked with tears and blood. Her own blood from where one of those things had touched her. She was sobbing as she ran, her breath ragged and desperate. When she saw me looking back, she screamed something I couldn't make out over the sound of my own heartbeat, and the cave's heartbeat, and the wet, sliding sounds of those things pursuing us both. We ran together toward the entrance passage, the tunnel that would take us up and out and back into daylight, where we could breathe air that didn't taste like copper, and the stone beneath us was actually stone. I could see the opening ahead, that blessed crack of gray light. And then I saw what was between us and it. The passage was contracting, but not evenly. About 15 feet ahead, the walls were pulling together and apart in a rhythmic motion, opening and closing like a sphincter valve, like the cave was swallowing. The opening would dilate to maybe 4 feet wide, then contract down to less than 2 feet. Then open again. Thump thump. Open. Thump thump. Closed. Thump thump. Open. If we timed it right, we could slide through when it opened. If we timed it wrong, we'd be caught when it closed. I put on a burst of speed, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. Sarah was right behind me. I could hear her gasping for air. I could hear her boots on the stone that was now flesh.
On 3.
She shouted.
We go on 3.
I reached the sphincter first. It was open, the passage wide enough to crawl through, but as I approached, it began to close, the walls contracting with muscular force. I waited, counted the rhythm. Open for about 3 seconds, closed for 2. Open, closed, open.
Now!
Sarah yelled. I threw myself forward and slid through on my stomach, the walls brushing my back and chest as they contracted around me. For one horrible second I thought I was stuck, thought the passage would close on me and cut me in half. Then I was through, tumbling into the larger space beyond. I turned back to help Sarah. She was halfway through when the passage spasmed. It wasn't the regular contraction I'd been expecting, but a violent convulsion. Like the cave had suddenly clenched every muscle at once. The walls slammed together and caught Sarah's left leg below the knee. She screamed, a sound so full of agony it barely sounded human.
Help me, John! Help me!
I crawled forward, grabbing her outstretched hands and pulled. She screamed louder, her fingers digging into my wrists hard enough to leave bruises I'd find later. But I couldn't move her. The passage had her leg and it wasn't letting go. When I looked down, I saw why. The floor beneath her was softening, turning from flesh-textured stone into actual flesh. Her caught leg was sinking into it, the fabric of her jeans dissolving where it touched the tissue. And the tissue was moving up her leg, climbing higher, beginning to absorb her. I could see it spreading, see her pants disintegrating, see her skin starting to blister and melt where the flesh touched it.
Pull harder!
She screamed.
For fuck's sake! John, pull!
I pulled. I braced my feet against the wall and pulled with everything I had. Sarah's hands were slipping in my grip, slick with sweat and that viscous fluid that was everywhere now. Behind her I could hear movement in the tunnel, could hear those things shambling closer. The passage spasmed again and Sarah shrieked as it crushed her leg further. I heard bone break, saw her knee bend in a direction it shouldn't. It had her up to mid-thigh now, and it was spreading faster. Her shirt was starting to stick to the ground, the fabric pulling apart, threads separating and dissolving. She looked up at me with eyes that were somehow still fighting, still refusing to accept what was happening to her.
Don't you dare leave me! Don't you fucking dare!
Behind her, one of those things reached the sphincter. The captain, his rotted face passing through the wall of flesh, pulling into something that might have been a smile. He reached an arm through the flesh, fingers stretching forward towards Sarah's back. The passage spasmed again, and this time, when it clenched, I saw Sarah's eyes go wide with a different kind of pain. The tissue was inside her now, I realized. It had absorbed through her skin and was working on her organs, her blood, everything that made her, her. And the captain's hand was 6 inches from her head. I looked at Sarah, I looked at that hand. I looked at the opening beyond that was starting to close, that exit that would trap me here if I didn't move in the next 5 seconds. Sarah saw it in my face, saw the calculation, saw the decision I was making.
John, no. Don't you dare. Don't!
I let go of her hands. She reached for me, fingers grasping, face twisted with betrayal and desperation.
John!
I backed up, just out of her reach. The captain's hand was almost on her now. Sarah's hand stretched toward me, fingers splayed. One last desperate attempt to grab me and pull me back into this nightmare with her. To make me share her fate since I'd chosen to abandon her. I kicked her hand away. It wasn't a hard kick, it didn't need to be. Just enough force to knock her arm aside to give me the extra second I needed to turn and throw myself at the closing gap. Her scream followed me.
You coward! You fucking coward! I hope it finds you! I hope it never lets you go!
I squeezed through the narrowing space, felt tissue close around me, felt it begin to pool and digest and absorb. For one terrible moment, I was certain I would die there, stuck halfway between chambers, while the cave slowly consumed me and Sarah's screams echoed in my ears. Then my fingers found purchase on harder stone, real stone, and I pulled with strength born of absolute terror. The tissue tore as I ripped free, leaving strips of my clothes and skin behind, and then I was crawling toward the light and air and escape. And then I was out, tumbling down the cliff face, the rope Mark had rigged catching me after a short fall. I hung there, gasping, my entire body shaking, and I heard it. From inside the cave, muffled by rock, but still audible.
John, please! It's got Sarah! It's...
Mark's voice, still alive, still conscious, still begging me to come back. I hauled myself up the rope, ignored the screaming, scrambled to the top of the cliff, and ran for Mark's truck. The keys were still in Sarah's pocket, but Mark had hidden a spare under the wheel, well, like he always did. I started the engine with shaking hands and drove away without looking back. I told the police I'd gone alone, that Mark and Sarah had stayed behind, planning a different hike. That I'd suggested they check the caves, but they'd seemed more interested in the coastal trail. I lied to their parents, to their friends, to the search and rescue teams that spent 2 weeks looking for them. I lied to everyone. The cave entrance had sealed itself. When the rescuers finally found it, 3 days later, it looked like it had been closed for centuries. Just another crack in the rock face that led nowhere. They went in with equipment and cameras, but only found stone. The chambers were gone, the passages collapsed. The organic tissue vanished like it had never existed. But now I know the truth. I know what's down there, breathing in the dark, digesting my friends slowly over years or decades or centuries. I know that somewhere in that living rock, Mark and Sarah are still conscious, still aware. Their bodies breaking down cell by cell while the cave savors them like fine wine. And I know I left them there. I moved away from Jack's Falls 3 weeks after they were declared missing. I couldn't take the looks from their families, couldn't sleep in that apartment knowing they'd helped me move in, couldn't walk past the diner where Sarah used to order extra hash browns and Mark would make fun of her for it. I thought distance would help. It didn't. 3 days after I escaped, I found something in my pocket. The gold coin. The one Mark had pried from the wall. The one that had made it bleed. I don't remember picking it up. I don't remember putting it in my pocket, but there it was, crusted with dry blood that wasn't mine. I threw it in a dumpster 6 blocks from my new apartment. The next morning, it was on my nightstand. I drove it 2 hours into the countryside and hurled it into a lake. I watched it sink into dark water. That night, I woke up with it clenched in my fist. My hand closed so tight around it that the edges had cut into my palm. My sheets were soaked with sweat and with that same sticky residue. My pillow smelled like copper. I tried putting it in a safety deposit box. The bank called me the next day saying that there'd been some kind of mistake with my box number, and when I went to check, the box was empty and the coin was inside my car's cup holder. So now I keep it. I carry it with me everywhere because I've learned that fighting it only makes things worse. And every day it gets a little warmer. Every day I can feel it pulse a little stronger, that rhythmic beat that matches what I heard in the cave. Sometimes when I hold it, I can hear them. Not voices exactly, but something like voices. A distant screaming that might wind up in a tunnel or might be something else. And buried under that sound, 2 words repeated over and over in Sarah's voice.
Come back. Come back. Come back.
Last week, I caught myself looking up directions to Jack's Falls. I don't remember opening my phone, I don't remember typing anything, but there it was. Route calculated. Estimated arrival time, 3:47 a.m. The coin is getting hotter. Last night it burned my palm when I held it, leaving a mark that looks disturbingly like a mouth. And when I sleep, I dream of tunnels, of warm, wet walls that pulse with life, of my friends embedded in red tissue, their eyes following me as I walk past. And the worst part? The part that keeps me up at night, staring at the ceiling, unable to escape what I've done? Sometimes when I hold the coin, I can hear the heartbeat. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. And I know, with absolute certainty, that it's waiting for me to come back. The cave remembers me. It tasted me when I tore free, got a sample of what I am, and now it wants the rest. It's patient. This thing has been alive since before humans learned to make fire, since before the pirates stumbled into its mouth and became just another meal to be savored over centuries. It can wait. It has time. And eventually, whether from guilt or curiosity or some pull I can't even begin to understand, I know I'll go back. The cave is patient, and it hungers. If you're reading this and you live near Jack's Falls, stay away from the cliffs north of town. Don't go looking for cave entrances or pirate treasure. Don't investigate if you hear sounds coming from the rock face. And if you do go, despite this warning, despite everything I've told you, if you find yourself in tunnels that feel too warm, if you see coins embedded in flesh-like walls, if you hear a heartbeat echoing through the dark, run. Don't look back. Don't try to save anyone. Don't hesitate. Just run. And pray it lets you go. The box was full of tiny, shriveled, decaying bodies. Blank, lifeless eyes staring into space. Skin split and dried, revealing a dark, gooey surface beneath. Some of them still had their limbs, if they were the lucky ones. Should I have expected anything more from my old box of fishing bait? If I wasn't running so late, I could have had time to buy some proper lures. But if I hadn't stayed for just one more cup of coffee with my parents, I wouldn't have gotten to my storage unit late, and maybe if I just left on time to begin with, I wouldn't be late for my best friend's bachelor party. I hadn't been back home in years, and for me, that home is a little town in the middle of nowhere, northeast USA. It's one of those towns that time seems to have missed in its march across the world. The air, the scenery, the buildings, they all reminded me of life here as a kid. Even looking at my tackle box covered in Ben 10 stickers I bought with money from mowing lawns. There was that scratch it got when it fell off the dock the night my friends and I bought a pack of monsters and went fishing. And there, on the lid, was one of those plastic, glow-in-the-dark stars everyone used to have on their ceilings. I laughed looking at it, remembering how I'd stolen it from my friend Nick's bedroom and hid it from my parents until I thought the coast was clear. Looking back, they may have let me off, knowing the kind of guy Nick turned out to be. It was stupid, but I stole it because it reminded me of the earrings that woman was wearing on that billboard. That billboard. The memory crept into my mind, or better yet, heaved itself up from the depths of my past. It sat on Route 161, on the way into town. "Who killed me?" was written across it, in bold yellow letters, followed by a name and a number still lost in the deep. But what I did remember was her face. Her photo must have been from the late 80s if I were to guess. She was young, mid-20s, around my age now. Her face was kind, framed in bleached blonde hair done up in a ponytail and laid over her shoulder. And hanging clearly from her ear was a gaudy plastic earring in the shape of a star, not unlike the one on my tackle box. I was too young to really grasp the idea of murder as a kid. I remember, whenever we would pass that stretch of road, I would always look at the woodline, hoping to see her alive and well, just lost. I remember asking my poor parents if the poster was wrong. I don't remember exactly what they said, but it wasn't the answer I wanted to hear. The memory of it cast a shadow as I loaded the kit into my truck. I could only assume whoever paid for that poster never found their answer. A few years later, someone covered her over with some new advertising. "What are you waiting for?" it said. Probably an ad for real estate or boat sales. A ping from our group chat pulled me back to the present, back to why I was here, for my friend, and to celebrate. It was the man of the hour himself, asking where I was, saying I was one of the last to show. I texted back, saying that I was on my way, before turning over the engine and pulling out of the parking lot. The sky was painted in one of those orange and purple sunsets. Leaves swirled in the air behind my truck, and I took off down the road. It was a back roads kind of evening, and just my luck, the back roads would take me where I needed to go. I turned off the main paved road drive onto Old Bog Road, which dipped down to the flatlands of the valley and came out by where we'd be staying. The further I drove, the more the darkness of the twilight filled the valley, rising like a murky tide. I turned on my headlights, which beamed out into the growing night. The air cooled, the woods deepened. It was an offness, like walking up as a kid and finding your nightlight off, or, as an adult, falling asleep by a wood fire and waking up in the dark. I rolled up my windows. As the sun gave way to moonlight, an unease I had of night driving set in. I began looking out for deer or anything else that might step out from the woodline. When I rounded a turn, the bright red flash of a silver BMW's reflector grabbed my focus. It was pulled over to the side of the road, lights still on, driver's door open. For the moment, I assumed someone stopped to take a leak, though he'd have to be desperate to do that here. Murky wetlands bordered both sides of the road, and the forest opened into a great bog, dotted with clusters of tree and debris, muddy, brown, and ripe in the decay of autumn. The water was flat as glass, reflecting the moon in near perfection, barely disturbed by some movement. I tried to make out what it was. It didn't dash like a fish, but it was too glossy to be any sort of log. I took my eyes from the road, just for a second. A flash of color emerged in my headlights. I swerved, slamming my brakes and skidding down the road. I didn't think I hit something, but I gripped the steering wheel, white-knuckled, and turned on my hazards. Behind me, about 20 feet back, was a person. I could just make her out as the lights flashed. I got out, stumbling over my words and apologies, but she waved her arms dismissively, staggering in place. Drunk, clearly. The BMW suddenly made sense. Rich tourists loved getting on benders at the lake houses down here. Them and druggies alike. I was equal parts pissed and sympathetic. "Hey!" I shouted. "Look, just stay where you are. I don't want you falling in. Is there someone I can call to pick you up?" She began to stumble her way towards me, getting closer with each hazard blink. "I can give you a lift. You're in no state to drive." She said nothing but came closer. At this point, I leaned back into my car. Whoever this was, she was drunk at best, and at worst had someone waiting in the woodline to jump me. I'd have to be late. The cops could deal with this, but I'd wait to make sure she didn't fall in. Looking back to her, she stopped. Stooped down where the water ran beneath the road in a culvert, fiddling with some rope that went off into the bog, tugging on it and wrapping it around her wrist, when, in between blinks, she was gone. Right after, I heard a splash and the sound of limbs smacking against water. "Shit!" I shouted, running down to where she fell in. I could make her out in the moonlight as my eyes adjusted, the ripples and waves in the water rising like silver threads. 1 foot sinking into the muck, I reached down, ready to grab her when I stopped. Something turned in my gut. Above the splashing, the forest, the bog, everything was silent. The hairs on the back of my head stood like pins, and I froze. When I stopped, she stopped. Total silence fell over the bog, and she floated still, face down. Then it started again, but with a single twist of her arm, which snapped backwards like an elbow. Her skin rippled, something squirming beneath. When her knees buckled back on themselves, even her spine writhed like a worm beneath her skin. The water splashed in a great line, all the way out to the bog center, where I could just catch for a second something dark, wrinkled like a great bloated leech that heaved itself up from the deep. My adrenaline spiked. Going pale as a ghost, I ran back to my truck. Behind me, I heard the water splash. Something soaked flopped onto the dirt road, scrambling and kicking up dirt and rocks. I jumped in my truck, slamming the heavy steel door, less than a second before something crashed against the window. In the fading warm glow of the cabin light, I made out her hand, sinewy and pale, sliding up towards the top of the glass. Her face emerged from the dark, blank glossy eyes that stared into space, skin dried and split, housing writhing white maggots in its damp pockets. And from the ear she was lucky enough to still have hung an earring, cracked and sun-faded but unmistakably in the shape of a star. I nearly punched a hole in the floor beneath the gas pedal, barreling down the road. As she was pulled away, I could hear scraping on glass, ending with the abrupt sound of a dry snap. I got to the cabin a few minutes later, feeling relief as that automatic floodlight filled my cabin with a warm, halogen glow. My heart was still racing. I gathered myself. I could have called the cops, but I know this town. I know our police officer. Whatever was out there, if he went to investigate, he'd go alone. No, I couldn't risk that. Couldn't risk whatever that was taking advantage of someone trying to help. And if I told my friends, same story. Nobody travels that road, not unless they're coming here, and at this point, I was the last to arrive. I kept it to myself, just for now. Swallowing down all of what happened, we made it a night to remember. Though all the while I watched the windows. Every time that light tripped on, I'd step to the window, looking out into the dark. Come morning, my friend and I shot out early for a trip into town to grab some donuts and coffee for the guys. And thankfully for me, some new fishing lures. Sorry about being late last night, I said, looking out the window into the woodline as I drove.
Seriously, man, don't worry.
He replied.
At least you're not Nick.
Nick? He was coming?
No, well, he was planning to. Not until he messaged me and said he had a new toy to show off. Fancy silver BMW, apparently. My bet was drug money. Never showed, though. Bailed last minute.
I said nothing, but stopped where our road met the one that led into town. There, sunken into the woodline, sat the remains of that billboard. Big chunks of the new ad had peeled away, showing what had been buried for years. Now a Frankenstein mix of the old and new. The moss-covered billboard read, "What killed me?" I heard my friend open up my tackle box.
What the hell? Good thing we're getting you some new lures.
He said, holding one up to inspect it.
Unless we're going for the dumbest fish in the bog, you're not going to catch anything using old bait.
Hey guys, this was another video that was months in the making. I want to thank Videth, who voiced the fire monster, Nightmares Nightly, who voiced Lance, Lady Spookaria, who voiced Cindy, Phoenix from Back to Ashes, who voiced Mark, Ponchi, who voiced Sarah, and Mason Jessop, who voiced the friend in Story 3, as well as Morgan Goodman, who made the music for our intro in Stories 1 and 3. But also Dexter, whose other channel, Hype Dreams, provided music for Story 2. And lastly, the authors, Trey Blosky, who wrote Story 1, Mo Logic, who wrote Story 2, and Duke of Spooks, who wrote Story 3. Finally, a big thank you to my patrons, and those in the Umbral Overlord tier, Shadow Thread Stories,